What is going on, everybody? Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Tyler Cobble, and on this channel we discuss commercial real estate investing strategies, leasing and management tips, market updates, and so much more. And today we're going to be talking about buying commercial real estate for beginners, how to go about the entire process. Maybe you're already interested in commercial real estate, but you don't really know how to get started. We're going to show you how to find deals, how to underwrite them, and then whether you should buy your next project, refi, or sell, and how to go about that entire process. So let's go ahead and dive on in. So a little bit of background on me. Some of y'all may have been following the channel for a little bit. I'm a commercial real estate investor, broker, and developer based in Nashville, Tennessee. I own 3 different entities. One is Parasol, which is a property management company. So we do office, retail, and industrial, as well as multifamily management. The Cobble Group does commercial real estate. So we do office, retail, and industrial real estate. We don't do any multifamily on that side. It's a very specific niche. And then I own Hamilton Development, which is my development company where we develop mostly office and retail mixed-use projects. So today we're going to be covering why you should invest in commercial real estate. What are the benefits of doing that? We'll cover some of the things that you should know before you get started investing, some things that I wish that I had known back when I got started, how to find a deal, which can honestly be one of the most frustrating aspects of starting in commercial real estate. It's a very different world, and it can be tough to find stuff. Going on site tours, how to handle yourself when you're going on site tours, what to look for, and then determining your investment strategy. What are you going to do on this investment? Is it going to be value add? Or are you going to tear it down and redevelop it? We'll discuss underwriting the deal. How to go about that process, because I know a lot of residential investors may know about the 1% rule, but commercial real estate is a little bit different. How to go about making an offer, performing your due diligence while it's under contract, sourcing your debt and equity. I get asked this all the time. How do you raise capital for commercial real estate investments? Well, today I'm going to show you a little bit of how to do that. Finally, takeover and operations, and then whether you should sell or refi the property. That can be one of the biggest questions that a lot of investors have is, now that I've completed this project, should I sell it and then 1031 exchange that into another property, or should I refinance and hold it? And I'll show you reasons why you may want to do both. So why invest in commercial real estate? Well, there are a number of benefits. These are my 5 favorites. The passive income cannot be discounted. I mean, that's why everybody gets into it to start, right? I mean, it's nice to be making that mailbox money while you sleep. That's also called cash flow. You can also utilize leverage when buying these assets. So unlike stocks and bonds, you can actually use other people's money to buy property without having to come out of pocket 100% on your own. So imagine the investment returns. The assets also appreciate over time. That's a pretty nice benefit. Typically, it compounds at 3% annually, at least historically. But in Nashville, we've seen some properties double, triple in price in the last few years. There's also a number of tax benefits. Just for owning real estate, you get write-offs because the buildings actually depreciate year over year because they're getting older. So you get to write that off. And then my favorite, the neighborhood impact. I think that it's such an amazing thing to be able to have an impact on the neighborhood around you. I tell this story all the time. There's this coffee shop right down the street from my office. It's one of my favorites. A few of my buddies actually opened it up. It's called Retrograde Coffee. And in that building, it was just, you kind of drove past it. You never noticed it. There was nothing really going on there. It was just kind of old and decrepit, and now it's one of the hot spots on the Dickerson Pike corridor. Everybody's in there. It's the coolest coffee shop around, and I love that. As commercial real estate investors, we can have an impact on the neighborhoods like that. So, commercial versus residential real estate. What are the differences? I get asked this all the time because everybody seems to be very familiar with residential real estate, right? It's one of those assets where you grow up in a home. So you kind of know how single-family home investing works. Well, commercial real estate is very different. It's often kind of shrouded in mystery, and it can be difficult to learn about. But the benefits of commercial real estate, it's far more scalable. It's far more scalable than single-family residential investing is, because If you think about it, a multifamily apartment complex with 100 units, I can come in and take down 100 doors in one acquisition, and I'm done, right? Like, you've gone through that process, 6 to 9 months of due diligence and underwriting and raising capital, you're done. Whereas if you wanted to go buy 100 single family homes, you're going to be taking those down one by one, which means now you've got 100 different roofs, 100 different locations to deal with, 100 different mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems that all have different years and different types. And, it's just, it can be a lot to manage. Whereas I can go and buy 350 units in a single location, or I can go buy a 9-story office tower and have all those tenants in one location. And honestly, you go through about the same amount of brain damage to get one office building with multiple tenants as you would one house with one tenant. So that's one of the reasons that I prefer commercial over residential. I actually do not invest in residential real estate. This surprises a lot of people, but I don't even own my own home. I still rent it because I can't justify residential as an investment. Now, obviously, I'm a commercial real estate professional and I understand where my money's going, so that makes it a little bit different, but that's where I'm coming from. What about other investment vehicles? You've got stocks, bonds, foreign exchange, futures, REITs. I do like REITs a little bit, but that's kind of the stock version of real estate. And you also have index funds and ETFs. The biggest difference is there you don't get a lot of the benefits that you do out of real estate, right? You cannot use leverage typically to buy these assets. You don't get tax write-offs for holding these assets. And one of the biggest things for me is the tangibility of commercial real estate. You just don't get that out of stocks, And also, I can't control the stock market like I can my own real estate investments. If something's going wrong with one of my properties, I can go out and I can start handing out flyers to try and find tenants, right? And trying to increase the revenues and decrease expenses or whatever. But, if something wrong or if something internally is going wrong with a large public corporation, there's very little that I can do. So that's, the control is something that I certainly like about commercial real estate. So what you should know before you invest. First, what is commercial real estate? We'll talk about what it is and what it is not. The commercial lease structures. There are several different lease structures that all have different implications in your investment. And so it's important that you know that before you get started. It's not just like an apartment lease where you just kind of have one thing and you go with it. Your A team is also very important, that you have a team surrounding you when you are doing these investments to make sure that you have looked at every possible nook and cranny where something could go wrong. How to raise capital for investments. That is one of the biggest things before you get started that you really need to know. You kind of need to be raising capital now, well before you ever find a deal, because raising capital is all about the relationship and the trust factor, especially if you don't have a track record. And then, how much can you actually make? I mean, that's why we're all here, right? You like the lifestyle, you want to make some money. So we'll cover a little bit about that too. So what is commercial real estate? Well, commercial real estate is anything that is not residential. I like to say it's anything that you wouldn't personally lay your head to rest on at night. Now you say, well, multifamily, technically you could live in a multifamily apartment complex and own it. And that's true, but it is, more than 5 units. That's technically commercial real estate. And that is for investment purposes. You're not going to buy an apartment complex and turn the whole thing into your, well, you might. You might buy an apartment complex and turn the whole thing into your home. Hopefully you're pretty successful and you can do that if you want to. It'd be pretty nice to have a giant pool. But it's office, retail, and industrial. Commercial comes from commerce. So anywhere that business is going to be done, that is what commercial real estate is. Now, the commercial lease structures. So these are the 3 main ones. You will find some variations of these out there, but these are the 3 that I mainly use in my day-to-day investing. The triple net, or net, that's what NNN stands for. If you've ever seen that, that is pretty much a favorite among investors. And it's most commonly used on single tenant deals and retail, but it is starting to be used more in the office and industrial sectors. On just about everything. The nets are common area maintenance, property taxes, and building insurance. And essentially what that means is that the tenant is going to be responsible for paying their pro rata share of all of those expenses. So the landlord basically collects a base rent, and then all of the expenses of the property are passed on to the tenants that occupy and utilize that property. So landlords like this, because if property taxes go up, then those expenses get passed directly on to the businesses and the tenants that occupy that space instead of them. Full service gross is another very common lease. This is more commonly found with typically less sophisticated tenants and landlords, or in office buildings or other locations where it's difficult to just break out your common area maintenance, taxes, and insurance. Sometimes it's easier to just kind of throw everything into one. And so you'll typically see these in office buildings, although like I said, they're starting to become triple net leases, which is really interesting to see. And then there's modified gross, which is basically a hybrid of the two. So full service gross covers all of your expenses. Triple net covers the tenant covers all the expenses. But in a modified gross, it's kind of a marrying of the two. So, the landlord may collect all of the money except for the tenant's responsible for utilities. So it's kind of a hybrid of the two. So here's who you need on your team. First and foremost, commercial real estate broker. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because I started off as a commercial real estate broker, but honestly, with the way that commercial real estate is set up, there's not a whole lot of ways for beginners to find good commercial deals. There's not, kind of a one-stop shop where you can just go and, shop for deals. I mean, there's not really an MLS like there is in residential real estate. So commercial brokers are typically a very good person to have on your team because they know the market, they're working on it day in and day out, and they can really help you, go through the entire process. They've done this many times before. It's literally their day job. Next up is a commercial real estate attorney. There are a lot of documents that you will be going through. You need somebody on your side that can help you with a purchase and sale agreement because there are no templates for that. You need somebody that can help you review leases and management agreements and anything else that you may have, as well as loan docs. Commercial real estate attorneys are very intimately involved in most of the aspects of the deals that I'm doing. A commercial contractor or architect. If you're planning on doing any sort of build out, or you need any floor plans or anything like that, it's very important to have a good commercial contractor that knows how commercial real estate should be done. Because, one of the big things is, and commercial real estate is going to have way more traffic than a residential home will, right? So you've got a different set of materials that are typically used in commercial buildings. So I've seen before where a residential contractor came in on a commercial real estate investment and they installed residential grade carpet. Now, residential grade carpet's nice and it doesn't look any different than commercial, but after a couple years of people coming and going out of that space, it will wear through and look terrible. So you got to be very careful about that. Obviously, a commercial lender, they're going to be one of your biggest partners in this deal because they're going to be writing the biggest check. And a lot of people don't look at commercial lenders as the partner that they should, but I mean, that's a business partner. They are going to believe in you, hope that you succeed. And they're not going to be writing a check unless they think that the deal can be successful. So you can also lean on them as a second set of eyes to make sure that you're not making some sort of mistake when you're buying a property. Of course, I always recommend an accountant or a CPA. I have a CFO. That helps you run through the numbers so much, and especially when you're talking about all the tax liabilities and write-offs that you can get for all of these deals. It's important that you have a professional that is working on that stuff. So my CFO, she specifically works on commercial real estate. She comes from that background. That to me is very important. Now, you're probably starting to notice a pattern with these types of businesses. They are all commercial specific. That's right. So a commercial broker, not a residential agent, a commercial real estate attorney, not just a general attorney. Everything involved in these commercial real estate deals is very specific to commercial real estate. And so you don't want to hire somebody that, of course, you've got a real estate license and you've got a law license, but environmental law is very different from commercial real estate law. So you want to have somebody on your side that is doing it the right way. Now, raising capital. One of the questions that you should ask yourself when you're first getting started in these deals is, do you need capital for your deals? I've got a couple of videos on how to buy commercial real estate with no money down. There are several strategies of getting by without having to go through the process of bringing on investors. If you can do that, they can be tough to pull off, I'm not going to lie. But if you can do that, it's sometimes better than having investors in your deal, because investors are putting their hard-earned money into your projects, and they're going to want to make sure that you are doing everything that you can to return their capital. Plus their investment returns, right? So you're basically going to have kind of another boss if you're bringing on investors. So there are certainly pros and cons. One con, you're going to have people to report to, but also that's kind of a pro, right? You've got hopefully some experienced people who are investing in your deals, and there'll be another set of eyes to help review the process so you don't just go out and make some big mistakes. Where to get started raising capital? Like I said, this is one of those relationship-based aspects of commercial real estate that you've got to get started on way before you need money. Now, I joined the Real Estate Investors of Nashville. I'm actually a board member over there. I've had several members from that group involved in my deals. I've also had other commercial real estate professionals in the market. I've got, my contractors have invested in my deals. My architects have invested in my deals. Just think about your immediate circle and how you can kind of, start pitching deals to them, because they know you better than anyone else does, right? And they already have that know, like, and trust factor with you. And that is the best thing possible. Now, one thing I do is I have not pitched my family on any real estate investments. I will probably never bring them in to anything, because to me, it's not worth having an awkward Thanksgiving dinner over. But other professionals, friends, stuff like that, we've always had a great run. So how much can you make in commercial real estate? Well, that's up to you. That's one of my favorite phrases in commercial real estate is, well, it depends. It always depends. What kind of projects do you want to do? Do you want to do, smaller single tenant, retail leased buildings? Well, the returns there are going to be very different than if you do a value add deal where you actually go out and you create the value and capitalize on that project. So one of the questions I get asked all the time is, like, what are the typical returns of commercial real estate? Again, it completely depends. You can buy a single tenant net building at a 5 cap, and that means if you pay all cash, you'll get a 5% return a year. And that can be great for somebody that just needs to 1031 some money into a project and keep it growing, or someone that just wants the stability of the cash flow. That's certainly not the point of life where I am right now. I'm more aggressively on the value add side, so I'm willing to actively work for it. I typically don't look at anything unless it's 8 to 12% cash on cash returns, and sometimes I'll look at an 18 to 22% IRR. It just depends. Now, we've had some deals that are over 30%, and I've had some that ended up being 8%. But as long as you're kind of making money on your money, that's what matters to me. Now, there are different streams of income on every deal. If you're going to be leading the investor group, the cash on cash returns from the cash flow, that's not your only return. You will also have the ability to structure in fees as the lead of that project. So you could collect a development fee. If you're doing something from the ground up and you're the one managing the day-to-day and actually developing the project, you can collect a development fee. We have asset management fees. If we're managing the day, not the day-to-day, but the overall asset, so we would hire the property manager, oversee the cash flows, make sure that we're sticking to the budgets, all that kind of stuff. You can collect an asset management fee. There are also acquisition fees. You get paid for buying the site. There are disposition fees. You get paid for selling it. So there are any number of ways that you can actually make money on the deal other than just the cash flow. So before you start your search, it's crucial that you prepare yourself. It can be very intense, and when I say that you've got to look at 100 sites to find one, I'm not exaggerating. I can't tell you how many hundreds of deals that I've looked at only to buy 5 or 6. It takes a lot of discipline and a lot of work, but it's obviously going to be worth it. You're buying these buildings that they're going to change your life. So I highly recommend that you kind of prep yourself mentally for how strenuous this search will be. You should also explore financing options. I would go ahead and open up the conversation with lenders, very similar to raising capital. You want to have that relationship ahead of time. It just helps, especially when you're getting started. One trick that I like to do, every bank loves to have deposits, because for every dollar that you lend them, they can loan out X amount more. So it actually brings them money for you to just place deposits with them. So I'll go and open up accounts with any banks that I want to do business with, because one, it builds that relationship, but two, I can show that I'm helping them make money. And so, of course, it makes them want to lend to you that much more. The next thing is obviously get educated. Learn everything you can. I've got a couple of resources here. I'll leave a links in the description below after we're done here. But 10 books to buy in commercial real estate investing. That's a blog that I put together that has my 10 favorite books on investing in commercial real estate. Highly recommend checking those out if you enjoy reading. Some of them may be on Audible as well. Here on the YouTube channel, I'm releasing videos every week on different investment strategies and how to go about that process. So definitely check out the library that we've got going here. I'm a big podcast guy. I love going on walks in the mornings and in the evenings and just throwing on a podcast and seeing what's going on. It's great to learn from people that are not in your market or that are in different sectors of commercial real estate, just to kind of see what they're doing. I think that it's pretty interesting, and podcasts are super easy to listen to. You just throw on your headphones and you let them go. But like I said, I'll leave those links in the description below after the video. All right, so let's talk about how to find a deal. So step one, I would hire a commercial real estate broker. I know that we covered this a little bit when I was going through the team, but they are your boots on the ground. Not only are they experienced in buying commercial real estate, but they likely know of off-market opportunities that they can put in front of you, which is one of the biggest. I can't say enough why you should work with a commercial real estate broker, but their access to off-market opportunities is paramount, because a lot of commercial real estate gets done off-market. A lot of the stuff that you'll see, it never hits the news until after it's done, and that can be one of the most frustrating aspects of the business. The next thing you can do is drive your market. Hop in your car, drive around the areas that you want to invest in, and look for properties that are a little distressed. You can always just go up and knock on the door. The grass is overgrown, the paint's chipping, maybe the roof is sagging a little bit. These are property owners that, one, may not care about the property. Two, maybe they live out of state and they just don't have the time to watch it. Or three, maybe they just don't have the money to keep it up. And you could be the person that's actually coming to them with a solution to help them get rid of that. You could also cold call property owners. I'm not a huge fan of cold calling. That's why I've set up so many fishing lines out there. If I'm not going to hunt every day, I've got to have all these fishing lines, and it works really well. But, my team cold calls, and guess what? They get great results out of it. And it's a good way of getting a hold of the owner directly and just having that conversation with them. And you can also build up a relationship. You cold call them, introduce yourself, you stop by that same week, meet them in person. Then, they can put a face to the name. That always helps. Direct mail. This might be the sleeper on the list. In my opinion, direct mail, it could be the best one. In recent years, really since the advent of email, people are just sending less and less mail. And so you could be the only piece of physical mail that person gets that week or that day. And so obviously they're going to see it. I always like to hand address my envelopes, because it's that much more personal, and obviously the chances of them opening that are very, very high. And I bought a deal back in August because of that. I sent a letter back in March, and he called me sometime in April or May, put the building under contract in June, and we closed in August. So you can find great deals doing that. Now, of course, there are online search platforms. These are good just for having a general idea of what's going on. In my experience, a lot of them have very inaccurate data. They're not up to date, or sometimes just completely wrong. But sometimes they're right. And you can always find a good commercial broker that way, see who's kind of active in the neighborhood. And it also gives you kind of an idea of what may be available out in the market without having to, physically go out and do anything. So online search platforms can be pretty good as well. Now, the last one is tax records and CRS data. We use CRS data all the time. That whenever we're, comping commercial real estate assets or looking for new investments. I mean, basically what it does is it pulls information from the tax records and it kind of compiles it all into one space. And so it can show you the mailing address of the property owners and that kind of stuff. So, if you're interested in kind of some, ninja searching, I would highly recommend CRS data. So now going on site tours, when you're going on a site tour, so you found a deal and it's time to go walk through it. Now, prepare yourself in advance. That's one of my biggest pieces of advice for new investors. You're dealing with professionals, especially, you're dealing with somebody that's owned the property for a while. They know what they're doing, or you're dealing with a commercial real estate broker that knows how to sell and get the best deal for their client. If you are not represented and the listing broker is showing you a space, they don't work for you. They work for the seller. So, that's important to keep in mind that their duty is to get the best deal possible for the property owner. So just prepare yourself in advance. Make sure that you've reviewed all the details of the property. You know exactly what you're stepping into so that you can have the most educated conversation possible. Now, keep your positive thoughts to yourself. If you like the property, if you think it's the perfect fit for you, if whatever, don't say anything. Like I just said, the commercial real estate broker that's the listing agent is not on your side. So if they think that you're hooked into the property and this is you've told them this is the perfect site, that nothing else comes close to this, well, now they know they've got leverage over you during negotiations. So don't let that happen. Just keep your positive thoughts to yourself. I've got some clients that all they do purposefully and intentionally is say all of the negative things about a property, and they keep this stone face when they're out inspecting. I mean, it works. It makes a whole lot of sense. Bring your inspection tools. I'll leave another link below.
Just a moment.
My investor
I didn't
tools.
get that. Could you try again?
I would inspect everything within reason as well with
I know.
those, because what you want to do is, you want to have a good enough idea before you put the property under contract of what the pros and cons could be, when you're going in and doing any sort of renovations. All right, determining your investment strategy. So there are several different investment strategies that you could use. And again, it's just going to depend on, your inclination to take on risk or not. And, the site, right? I mean, some sites are going to be perfect for the value add BRRRR strategy, whereas some are just better for land banking. So we'll walk through each of these real quick. So development and redevelopment. The development is where you completely re-envision what a property could be. And so that's saying, we're going to buy this raw piece of dirt and we're going to build an office park here. And here's the vision. You go through the planning. Sometimes you've got to go through rezoning, but that's development. Redevelopment is seeing a site that maybe it's currently an office building, but you're going to go in and you're going to completely turn it around into an apartment complex, or you're going to tear down that existing building and, build a warehouse. So basically you're taking something that's already been developed before and just changing what it is. I'm working on several of those projects now, mostly mixed use. I'm a big fan of mixed use. I think that's kind of the future of commercial real estate, especially in a post-COVID world. The value add or BRRRR strategy. BRRRR stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. That's one of my favorites. It's probably my favorite strategy. It's the one that I've used the most out of any of these. It is where you go and you find a site. You do any renovations to it necessary to have a tenant see value in those renovations. So don't renovate it to comps. You just want to get the most rent possible. So don't overdo it. And then you rent it to a tenant. And then once it's rented, the beautiful thing about commercial real estate is that it's valued on a cap rate, not based on comps. So that property, by renting it, you've significantly increased the value. So now you can refinance based off that value, pull all of your cash back out, if not more. You may be able to do a cash out refi and then move on to the next property. So basically, you'll just be able to cash flow that asset, get all your money back, and go buy something else. So that's what I like about that one. I mean, you can kind of just keep snowballing cash. Land use value add. So this would basically be buying a piece of property that you believe is not at the highest and best use. So maybe it's a residential piece that's on a major thoroughfare and you think it should be commercial. What you would do is buy that asset, go through and renovate it. Rezone it, and then you would flip it to another developer. So, you've created a significant amount of value by rezoning it because now somebody else can come along and do something way bigger than what they could before. Let's see, land banking. Land banking is where you buy a piece of property that's in the path of development and path of growth, and you just kind of sit on it. You just wait for something to come along. We've got a couple of clients that do this. They just 1031 into large tracts of land that they believe are in the path of growth. And, 5-10 years later, the property has, 10x'd in value, and they'll sell it and do the same thing again. So it's called land banking because it's literally like treating it like a bank. You just place cash there and you just wait. Then there's the long-term buy and hold. So this is a pretty common strategy for like single tenant net leases. Like this would be where you go through and you just buy a Walgreens that has a 20-year lease and you just let it sit there and you just let it appreciate while you collect some money. And then there's owner occupied. So owner occupied is a strategy where maybe you own a business. Well, you can actually get better terms, just like if you're buying, residential property, you can get better terms since you will be the one occupying the space. Now the downside, you've got to occupy at least 51%, but I see that as an upside too. You could buy it, occupy 51%, rent 49% out to other tenants, and now you're kind of doing a house hack, what I like to call the commercial house hack. So, well, I guess we already kind of went through this. So, development, redevelopment, going through reimagining a site. Developers are really coordinating a whole lot of other people that are, throughout the entire process, right? The developer is essentially a project manager. They control, how we're going to do the lending, how we're going to do the construction, how we're going to do the management. I mean, they do every aspect. So, like I said, it's not always ground up, but it can be. I mean, it's ground up, and you could tear buildings down and redevelop the site too. Let's see, land use and entitlements. Those are very important. If you buy the wrong piece of property, if you buy a property that's not zoned for what you're trying to do with it, then you can get into a lot of trouble. That's how people lose a lot of money doing development. It's very easy to do because you're buying land that's not making any money. So again, the BRRRR, let's see. Oh, I mean, here's another thing. I like to buy these at well below replacement costs, right? So I recently did one. I'm probably going to do a case study on this. It was a 2-story office building, and I bought it for $81 a foot. Now, you could not build that office building back for $140 a foot. So what we did, we bought it at $81. I put $20 a foot into it in rehab, so we're $101 a foot all in on this BRRRR property. And guess what? I mean, I was able to bring it at well below market rates because everybody else was having to get a return on $140 a foot, whereas all I needed was $101 a foot. So that helps significantly. Again, highest and best use. You're typically going to be working with architects, engineers, land use attorneys to go through the design, rezoning, and any entitlements. This can take months, if not years, to do, depending on the size of the property. And then what most people will do is they flip it to another developer or an investor. Or what you could also do is you go through the rezoning and entitlement process, you make it worth significantly more than what you paid for it, and then you contribute that land as equity into another developer's project. So, you can also, we're doing this on a site where we're buying it for $2.8 million. And because of the value that we've created in it, we'll be investing it with another another developer will be building on it, and they're valuing the land at $6 million. So we've created a significant amount of value there. Land banking. You could also do the strategy I just said with highest and best use on land banking. You can contribute it as equity into someone else's deal. This is one of the best things that I've seen people do, because then you don't have to worry about 1031ing out of land and deal with all that, because maybe you want to hold it, and maybe you find a developer that also wants to hold it. And so you contribute it, you'll develop it, you get 20% of their deal, and you make a significantly larger return on that investment. The long-term buy and hold, like I said, usually these are triple net. Now you do have a couple of options when you're buying these kinds of assets. Either you can pay down the debt and just, because like I said, if you're getting a 20-year Walgreens deal, maybe you do a 20-year amortization or 20-year term on your loan. It could be tough to find banks that are willing to do 20-year terms, but it's not impossible. I mean, we've got one bank that we work with that will do a 20-year term. It's basically 4 or 5 year arms. Or you'd have to refi it every 5 to 7 years. Just depends on kind of what you're looking to do. But yeah, you definitely take advantage of that long-term appreciation. I mean, think about it. If Walgreens is going to be occupying that space, it's a very good corner. Owner-occupied. So the thing with owner-occupied is after a year, you can actually move out, or however your loan terms are. It really depends on how you negotiate it. But after a little bit, you can actually refinance the property, put better debt on it, and move out, and then treat it as a 100% investment property. And then you can repeat that process. So then you go and buy another owner-occupied property, and now you've got 2 investment properties. That's a pretty good strategy for people who are just getting started that, again, own a business. Now, let's talk about underwriting the deal. So when underwriting a deal, the first thing that you've got to do is gather market data. As much data as you possibly can. So where do you do that? How do you do that? Well, CRS is a pretty good, that's a pretty good system for doing that. That's how we pull all of our comps, because I can go in there and I can see what's sold in the last 12, 18 months. And it, helps me understand, okay, well, something else that, had a 3,000 to 5,000 square foot office building on about an acre sold for X. So my property is probably worth Y. So that, that's pretty important there. I would talk to commercial real estate brokers. They're going to know what lease rates are and what's typical. You may be in a market where, all the tenants are used to full service leases, but you're a triple net investor. Well, if you're going into a new market where everybody wants full service leases, you can't really offer a triple net deal because, the tenants just won't get it. So yeah, when determining your lease rates and income, highly recommend working with a broker or or a property management company that is actively managing properties very similar to that. Property managers are basically, they're like title attorneys. They're kind of the underworld of commercial real estate. They know everything that's going on because they're the ones collecting the rents and dealing with the tenants, right? So they could be a great option for you when you're looking for lease rates. Go ahead and estimate your expenses too. As a property management company, we kind of know what it costs to manage a certain asset. So again, maybe you lean on a property manager to kind of help you with that. But you got to take into account common area maintenance, property taxes, building insurance, everything down to what's Wi-Fi. Are you including Wi-Fi in your costs? Some of our properties have that, some don't. So, each side is very different. Now, should you do back of napkin versus, underwriting software? What makes sense for you? Well, I use kind of a back of napkin number whenever I'm buying or looking at buying and making an offer. And then if it passes the sniff test of, that back of napkin, then I'll go ahead and fully underwrite it because I've got an underwriting software. And I'll leave a link to my email below if you're interested in buying that. I'm actually going to do a video on how to use it here pretty soon. But, it gets really in depth. I mean, it shows you what your internal rates of return are in year 4 if the vacancy rates are X. I mean, it really, really goes into it. And so it's important, especially when you're raising capital and pitching to lenders, that they see that you've fully thought through what this is and not just, hey, I think it'll make 8% returns and we should buy it. So that's kind of how I look at it. Now, what back and napkin number do I use? Well, if I can get, an 8 cap or a 7 cap, typically about an 8 cap once it's stabilized, like I'll actually start looking into it and underwriting it. All right, now making an offer.
One moment.
So when making an offer, there are certain things that will be in every
Stand by, please.
single offer. I mean, obviously, you're going to have.
I'm not sure I understand.
You're going to have your due diligence period, the closing date, and what needs to be inspected. Are you going to have any contingencies in there? Now, I typically don't have any contingencies in my offers because I have a due diligence period where I can back out at any given moment for any reason. So, it just depends on how your attorney decides to structure it. Highly recommend that you get a real estate attorney. A lot of people go through the process and they're like, well, I don't want to spend the money on it. Trust me. What you don't want to happen is you get out of a due diligence period and then something, comes up like environmental and you didn't think through that and that costs you $20,000. Well, you're going to be wishing that you spent $3,000 to $5,000 or whatever it ends up being on an attorney to handle the entire process for you. We use an attorney on every single deal we do, no matter how big or small it is. Now, one thing that is typical in commercial real estate that isn't as common in residential is the use of a letter of intent. It's basically a precursor to a purchase and sale agreement where it's like, hey, we're going to agree on these basic terms. If we can't agree on these basic terms, it's typically the economics and timelines of the deal. If we can't agree on these, then there's no point in getting into a PSA negotiation. So leave me I'm considering putting together a letter of intent template that we would just, sell to you guys. If you're interested in a good letter of intent template, it's what I use on everything. Just let me know, leave me a comment below and we'll look into doing that. So performing your due diligence. Now, once you've got the property under contract, that's when your work really begins, because if you don't do your due diligence properly, there is so much that you could miss, and all it takes is you to miss one thing and you've lost all your returns. Say you don't realize, this site is zoned commercial, but it doesn't permit auto garages, and you were going to open up an auto garage in there. Well, now you've completely lost that plan. You've got to start, scrap it and start all over, and that could cause some problems. So, the first thing you want to do is confirm zoning and codes. You got to make sure that the property that you're actually allowed to do with the property what you want to do, and that the building is up to code. We've had some buildings that are zoned commercial, but they have been used as residential. And so if it's a single family home that was just grandfathered in, the city came through, rezoned it to commercial, well, that home is not going to be up to commercial code. So if anybody moves into that space, they're going to have to bring it up to commercial code and spend all that money. Well, as the property owner, that could be a problem for you because tenants may not want to spend 20, 30, 40, 50 grand plus just to retrofit your space for their use. They may want you to do that. So, that's something you want to know on the front end. I highly recommend doing a survey, environmental and geotechnical reports. The survey will tell you where the property lines are. This can be very important because sometimes stuff just gets missed, and over the years, people put fences up where they shouldn't, and it'll tell you what you're actually buying. I've seen surveys come back significantly different than what people thought, and that will throw off deals completely. Environmental will basically show you if there's any, environmental concerns. Maybe there's a gas tank that was buried on site. Well, has that gas tank leaked? Has it not leaked? Have there ever been gas tanks on site? What are the soil qualities? That's very important because environmental remediation can be extremely expensive. If you buy a site that used to have gas tanks on it and you didn't know that, and you'd be surprised at where you'll find gas tanks just in the ground places. It's six figures. I've seen it run six figures because you have to scoop out all of the dirt around it, and you have to keep doing it until they come back and test it and don't find any gas. So you got to be really careful there. And the geotechnical will just tell you what kind of soils or rock that you're sitting on. That way you know what you're getting into when you do the site development. Typically, if you're not going to be doing any development, you don't need to do a geotech report. But if there is, if you're breaking ground at all, you have to have geotech. What you don't want to do is find out you're building on quicksand and you're building, or there's a sinkhole below you, or there's so much rock that it's just going to be impossible for you to blast it all out and make it make sense. Now, also inspect the improvements. If there are any buildings on site, get in there, check them out. I look at just about everything I possibly can. And if I'm not doing it, I'm hiring a team to go in there and do it as well. And typically what I do is I'll get in there and inspect it first, and then I'll hire a team to do it. And sometimes that's just me and my contractor. Sometimes it's the property manager. But sometimes I'll actually hire an inspector to go through and get me a report to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Because even though I've bought and invested in and renovated and developed, a number of properties, you never know where surprises will pop up. And I don't like surprises when when we're talking about this much money. Have your attorney do a title search. You want to make sure that the person selling you the property can actually sell it to you, like they are actually the owners. Sometimes, property gets passed down generation to generation, and there could be a third cousin somewhere that doesn't realize that they actually own a piece of this property. And if somebody sells it and that third cousin shows up, they can lay claim to your property, and it can get messy. So you want to make sure that you have clear title when you're purchasing it. You also need to review all of the documents. So these are the leases, contracts, management agreements, even trash agreements. Whatever documents will transfer with the property, you need to read through those or have your attorney do it, as well as your property management or your leasing brokerage, whoever's going to be handling that with you moving forward, because that you're going to be inheriting that, right? So you will be responsible for adhering to those contracts. Now, sourcing the debt and equity. Once you've found a deal, you're doing your due diligence, you've decided that, yes, you are going to be moving forward, it's time to place the debt and equity. So pitch the deal to your lenders, ask them for term sheets. Typically what I'll do is just say, give kind of a brief summary of what the deal is going to be and, my plans for it. So maybe it's a, 5,000 square foot strip center. It's run down, so I'm going to renovate it, and here are the kinds of tenants that I envision going in here. Here's the kinds of rents that I expect that we will get. Here's how much the renovation will cost. They need to know kind of the full financial picture and what the game plan is, basically a business plan, so that they can justify going to bat for you and help get the loan for you. So then put together an offering memorandum. An offering memorandum basically walks through all of the metrics of the deal. This is not something that I typically share with my lender. There's no reason to. This is going to be given to the investors, anybody that's going to be giving you equity, because then you go through, what is the environment? Why are you investing in this market? Why are you investing in this product type? Why this property? What is the game plan? I mean, it's very, very in depth. I mean, we just put one together that I think is 44 pages. So you want to be really in depth, because when you're talking to capital, you need to look like you know what you're doing. And so I'll make a video later on what my offering memorandums look like, and we can kind of go through that process as well. But then once you have that offering memorandum, you take it to investment partners. Because at this point you've got the financials put together, you know what your debt will cost, what the interest rate and amortization terms are. And, now you've got kind of a full picture. You can start pitching it to capital and raising equity. So, how much capital should you raise when you're doing these investments? Well, obviously whatever the down payment is, if you got to raise if it's a 25% loan to or 75% loan to value, you've got to raise at least 25%. I like to overraise, depending on the type of project that it is, anywhere in the 2.5% to 5% range. Just because you're going to need some operating expenses. You never know what could pop up that you'll just need some excess funds for. Depending on how you've structured the investment, if you've got to pay out your investors a preferred return, you need to raise that on the front end if there's no cash flow coming in to cover that. And so that'll kind of help you get started. But again, it just depends on what kind of investment you're doing. All right, the fun part, takeover and operations. So after you've bought the property, you got to actually make the project successful. So should you hire a property manager? I would include a property management fee in your underwriting. I think that if a deal does not work, if you put in like an attorney's fees or property management fees and the deal doesn't work at all anyway, regardless. All of that stuff should be covered by your deal because the deal should be big enough and good enough to cover that. If not, you could have one thing pop up. Maybe a tenant moves out and you've lost, 1 month of rent, and that kills your entire return because, the deal didn't have enough meat on the bone. You tried to force something that just wouldn't work. So my recommendation is always to hire a property management team. They are very, very good at running the day-to-day and operating these assets to increase the value. So they will manage, all of the tenant relationships, which you definitely want to pass that off to a management team. But they'll also handle any rent increases and deferred maintenance. If you've got any deferred maintenance, or they can do preventative maintenance. Make sure that, the roof gets replaced before there's leaks so that you have, less damage. I would, of course, loop in your brokerage team if you're planning on doing any leasing at all in the space. They will help you get that leased up before you have vacancies. That can be very important to make sure that you're maximizing your returns. And then construction and renovations. That needs to take off immediately, as quickly as you can, just so that you can get the space turned over. Because while the space is under construction or in renovation, you're not making any money on it. Right? So the quicker that you can get any of that work done, the quicker you can start making money. So, I like to line it up so that as soon as I close on a property, the contractor's starting the next day. You'll, of course, want to get your financials and accounting set up. Like I said earlier, hopefully you've got a CPA. On my team, we've got a bookkeeper, a CFO, and a couple of partners that all they do is focus on that kind of stuff. And that can be very important because what you don't want to do, especially if you're doing a syndication, is improperly handle the financials and accounting. You don't want to improperly do that anyway. But commingling of funds, there's so many things that can go wrong where you can actually get sued and get into a lot of trouble. So you want to make sure that's all done correctly on the front end. Cost segregation studies. Highly recommend that you run a cost seg study. That is a cost segregation study is essentially accelerated depreciation. You hire a firm to come in and they go through and they take note of every single little piece down to, what kind of screws went in the door. That's exaggerating just a little bit, but you kind of get the point of, how can we write this off on taxes and do it in 7 years instead of 39, which is commercial, which can last a long, long time, or 27 and a half, depends on what you're looking at. Cost seg studies. Yeah. So I do a cost seg study on just about every single property that we've got. Sometimes it doesn't make sense depending on how small the deal is, or if we're planning on flipping it. If you're planning on holding it for any period of time, over 1 or 2 or 3 years, I highly recommend doing a cost seg study. Also study your loan terms. You've got to know what is permissible and what is not in your loan so that you don't get that called. Because the last thing that you need is to be, halfway underway with your project and you lease to a business or something, that the bank just doesn't like, and they call your loan. Because that's going to put you in a bind and you don't want to get foreclosed on. So make sure you understand the loan. It is a contractual agreement that you have signed, so you should know that anyway. So once the project is successful, should you sell or should you refinance it and hold it? With any of the strategies that we discussed earlier, you could sell or you could hold it for the long term and refi it. So maybe you refinance. Maybe you go through the process and you've created enough value to where there's trapped equity that you can actually pull out of that deal, and you get a new loan on the property and actually take cash out. What I love about that strategy is that whenever you take cash out of a refi, it is not taxable. It is tax-free because it's technically a loan. So if you pull out $100,000 in profit on a property from a refi, that's $100,000 you do not have to pay taxes on. You can go buy another piece of property with that and continue snowballing it. But maybe you decide to sell. I've had some projects where we went in using the BRRRR strategy, and then ended up getting an offer that we kind of couldn't turn down. So we decided to sell. I'm a big believer in holding on to commercial real estate as long as you can, because even if you buy a bad deal, if you hold it long enough, it won't be a bad deal. Now, it may take 10, 20 years, but you hold it long enough and it'll work. I mean, you look at all these, the older guys in the business that are like, man, I wish I'd held on to that property. I can't believe I sold it. But sometimes selling makes a lot of sense, and you can use those funds to go buy a bigger, better asset. And you won't regret that because it helps you, take that next step. So at the end of the day, it comes down to your long-term goals. How aggressive are you looking to grow? Do you enjoy building a portfolio of properties? Are you just trying to build up as much cash in your bank account as possible so you can disappear into Mexico? It just all kind of depends on what you're looking for. So some final thoughts. One thing I highly recommend is that you find a mentor. Find somebody that has gone through this process before and can really show you the ropes. Commercial real estate is very complicated. I'm an advocate of the fact that you cannot learn how to do commercial real estate from watching this video. You can't learn it from reading my blog. You can't learn it from listening to podcasts. It doesn't matter. I mean, I didn't really get started in investing in commercial real estate until after I bought my first property. It took me 4.5 years of being a commercial real estate broker and helping other people build their investments before I finally said, I'm buying something. I just didn't have the confidence. I was kind of scared of it. As soon as I bought that first investment, I bought 3 more that year. So you really just got to knock down that domino. Learn as much as you can while you're going through the process. I know I just told you can't learn everything from reading a blog, but check out the blog. We do put a lot of good information out there. And I spent 4.5 years listening to podcasts and blogs before I finally pulled the trigger. So, it's a good combination of both. I also think that,
Just a moment.
having a mentor, having a coach, it makes a big difference when you're going through the process.
One more moment.
Let's get into questions. There's a couple of questions down here. Ahmad, what's going on, man? How you doing? Good to see you again. So the first question is, what all should we keep in mind while doing due diligence? Well, hopefully I covered that. Aside from inspecting the building, making sure the zoning and codes all make sense, I would do all that. Definitely check the leases. I've seen people that don't check the lease. They're buying a property where they're supposed to be getting rent, and the tenant may have a termination clause. They can just terminate the lease for any reason, and now you don't have any income. So be careful with that. Next question is, how do you value add and increase the value of a commercial property which already looks top notch? That's a great question. I mean, there are a number of things that you could do. What could you do to program the common areas and see, how you can squeeze a little bit more money out of that? Because, one thing that you could do is vending machines, or maybe you own a multifamily building and your laundry machines aren't, they're just not as good. Upgrade the laundry machines. It's kind of tough. If somebody's already come through and done a heavy value add on a property, there just may not be a whole lot of meat on the bone, and maybe that's not the best asset for you to be looking at. Let's see. All right, looking to purchase a hotel through owner financing, how to address COVID guidelines in regards to purchasing a mid-size hotel. Oh, I didn't even realize I can add this to the broadcast. Look at that. All right, well, this is our first time doing a broadcast, so hopefully I'll get this better next time. That's a great question. I'm not big on hotels right now. They kind of scare me just considering the environment. I think that they're going to recover and they're going to come back very, very strong because everybody's going to want to get back to traveling as soon as they can. But in the meantime, what does that look like? I think that there's too much uncertainty. But as long as you're willing to take that uncertainty, I would just say, when you're buying that hotel, make sure that you are going through your due diligence and that there's enough meat on the bone that if you're only getting half of the ADR that you were expecting to get, that you can make it work. Of course, do all the sanitation protocol. Make sure you're telling all of your tenants or prospects, what you're doing on a day-to-day basis to help them stay COVID-free while they're traveling, and keep it going that way. All right, Felice, what are the top U.S. markets you recommend for getting into commercial real estate? That's a great question. I am huge on the Southeast right now. I think since COVID hit, the Southeast has been growing for a while. It's a lot of, you've got some of the biggest blue cities in red states, which creates this environment that is ideal for investing in commercial real estate. Take Nashville, for example. Nashville is very blue, and it's in a very red state. So you've got a very progressive, educated city that's in a state that doesn't have state income. So the fact that you can move from a California, Chicago, or New York to Tennessee, you get a very similar environment as to what you have, or Nashville rather. You get a similar environment as to what you had before, but there's no state income tax. And so that's why a lot of investors are actually buying property in Nashville now. And their returns are way better. I know guys that are willing to buy 2 and 3 caps in California, and then imagine having to pay taxes and everything on top of that. Whereas you can get a 5 cap in Nashville, you don't have tax, and it's an environment where Nashville, 80 people a day are moving here. Yes, Florida too. I like Florida as well. Miami is a pretty good spot to buy. Orlando, Tampa, those are growing very quickly. So yeah, I would definitely say Florida as well. Alabama, maybe not, but Texas, Tennessee, and Florida are probably the biggest. I don't know if Florida has state income tax or not. I know Texas and Tennessee don't, which is why Austin, Houston, Nashville, even Chattanooga in Tennessee is taking off, because Chattanooga is located right between Atlanta and Nashville, and Atlanta and Nashville are both growing very, very quickly. So. All right, well, that is all we have for today. If you're interested in more commercial real estate investing strategies, leasing and management tips, market updates, and more, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We'll keep these live streams coming to you, and I will see you next time. Take care, guys.